Well, hey, you guys. A little bit of confusion the last couple of weeks. I hope that didn't cause too much problems for you. But anyway, hey, you guys remember what a parable is, right? It's just a story, and I call it a story. And a couple of weeks ago, I said this is a story. And it was a parable. And it's mainly used by Jesus to teach his disciples certain spiritual lessons. And that's what a parable typically is. And what's really cool is, I've learned just lately that Jesus is not the only one that used parables. And even there's parables in the Old Testament. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought I'd check into it and see what some of the parables were. So I want to tell you one of the parables this morning. And I'm going to tell you the parable, and you're going to remember when the parable was used as we go, and you're going to see what happened. But the parable is this. There was a rich man and there was a poor man. They both lived in the same village. And this poor man had one little ewe sheep, little ewe lamb. That's all he had. Didn't have anything else. And he fed it from his own table, and he slept with it, and he petted it, called it names, and he just named it. And anyway, that's all he had. Meanwhile, in this same city, there was a guy that had goats and sheep and cows and all over the place, more than he ever could need. And he had a visitor come to see him. And this rich man, when his visitor came to visit, wanted to feed him. So instead of going out in the pasture and getting one of his own sheep to fix, he went to this poor man's place and grabbed his only sheep, his little ewe lamb, grabbed it and butchered it out and fed it to his guest. And that was the parable. And it was told to David. And David said, I can't believe this. What in the world's going on? He said, this guy ought to die. As surely as I'm king right here, as this man's going to die, he's going to repay that guy fourfold. And this is unheard of, and I'm not going to tolerate it. Boy, he got all upset. Now, what's really the turn about this thing is Nathan, the prophet of God at that time, told David this parable because this is just after he got through taking another man's wife and making her his own and even killing her husband to kind of cover up for it. And so David, that had, later in the same chapter in 2 Samuel 12, 1 through 4, about in that area. Anyway, Nathan told David that the Lord has said, I have given you to be king, I've given you all this stuff, and I've made your way good, I've killed all your enemies. And he said, God said, if that wasn't enough, David, I would have given you more. But no, you go out and take this one guy's prized possession, his wife, while he is fighting a battle for you, and you take her for his own wife. And so when Nathan told David about this rich guy that took that poor guy's ewe lamb and fed it to his guest, David got so enraged, he said, this guy's got to die. And Nathan told him, he said, look, David, you're the man. You're the one who did that. Now, in those days, it was dangerous to be a messenger, because if the king didn't like the message, he'd kill the messenger. They did that a lot. Anyway, so David repented, and he was sorry for it, and one thing and another. But anyway, that's the time it was used. Now, as we look at that parable and try to draw some conclusions off of it for our own self, like today, I want to read you what Jesus says, the same vein of thought. Okay, and it's in Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 1 and 4. He says this. He says, "Don't criticize." A lot of versions say, "Don't judge." Don't criticize, and you won't be criticized. For others will treat you as you treat them. Oh, do unto others as you. That's another way to say that. And why worry about the speck that's in your brother's eye, and you have a board in your own eye? Should you say, "Friend, let me help you with that speck in your eye," when you can't even see because you have a board sticking out of your own eye? You hypocrite! Get rid of the big beam first in your eye, and you can see to help your brother with the speck in his eye. And see, that's where we end up a lot of times in our life. We see the faults of others, And that was what the Pharisees did a lot. They could see where other people were sinning and not doing what they were supposed to, but they couldn't see it in their own selves. And you know, sometimes I'm that same way. I'll be driving down the road and some of my guys makes a mistake. He pulls out in front of me and I go, "Well, you stupid guy, what do you think you're doing?" And I go, "Oh, you know what? Just yesterday I did the same thing. I understand. You know, I'm not going to judge him because of the foolishness he did just then and not watching, because I did that just yesterday." And see, that's the way we're supposed to be, is not criticize other people. When we have the same faults ourselves, and sometimes we're in deeper fault and deeper problems than the guy with us. So Jesus tells them, he says, don't be going around criticizing other people, judging other people for what they're doing when you've got the same problem yourself. He said, don't do that. Now, he calls them this when he gets all done with it. He says, "You hypocrite." Now, we've talked about what hypocrite means, haven't we? You remember? It's a lot of times they used it for an actor. In those days, it was a different culture than we even understand, but in those days, most of the time, women could not be actors. They couldn't do that. And so if there was an actor who was going to be a woman in a play or whatever, he would put a mask up over his face, and it would look like somebody different. And he would put that mask up and act one way, and then take that mask down and act another way. And they call that, they were hypocrites. They were two-faced. They were acting two parts. And that's what God says in the Scripture. He says, look, when you judge these other people, he said, and when you have this big beam in your own eye, you're being a hypocrite. Now, when I looked up hypocrite back in those days, what it meant, some of the explanations, one of the word was this, dissembler is what it is, a dissembler. Now, what in the world is a dissembler? And so when I looked up some thing, what it meant, here's what it said about it. He said it's being a phony, being two-faced, being pretender. And so you guys, when you're looking at other people and you're condemning them and criticizing them for doing such simple things sometimes, and you have some of the same problems in your own life, you're being a phony. You phony baloney. That's what we used to call people that were phony. You phony baloney. Anyway, whatever. So anyway, we need to learn about being. Another thing that God said in the account of when it happened, that David showed no pity for the man. He didn't show him any pity. He said, "Oh, I'm going to take care of that guy." And then we found out that it was him that Nathan was talking about. He changed his tune a little bit. So we need to be very careful about criticizing other people and saying things negative about them and being sometimes pretty harsh, pretty destructive to them and about them, because we don't maybe agree with them, we don't understand it or whatever else. At the same time, we have problems of our own. Now, this is and by no means says that we should just let everything go and don't think about it. That's not what it means. So don't even go there. If you're lying, I can stand here and say, "Look, you guys can't be lying. You can't lie." It says in the Scriptures that liars are not going to take a part in the kingdom of God. You've got to stop that lying. If I tell you that, see, I'm not being critical of you. I'm not judging you, because the word itself has already judged that liars are going to be a deep hurt. So see, that's not the same thing. But if I'm being critical about some of the faults that you have, about, you have a temptation that you keep giving into, and I'm going, "I don't understand why that old boy keeps doing whatever," then you see we have a problem. Now, I've told you this story before. I want to tell you one more time. I was a bowler back when I was young in the National League. I was cool. I would bowl with my dad. And when I was up there and I was all proud and everything. Anyway, this one guy kept coming he was on our team, kept coming, and he kept saying, when he showed up, he'd be drunk. And he'd bowl, and he had like a 230 average. And he'd show up drunk, and he'd bowl 150. And so we lost all the time. Not all the time, but we lost because this guy was showing up drunk. I told Dad, I said, "Let's get rid of this guy. Let's get rid of this guy. If he can't control himself any better than that, get rid of him." And Dad said, "Well, don't be too harsh. Don't be critical. Don't criticize too much. Yeah, it's wrong and everything, but don't be critical of him too much," because he said, if you had his problem, you would drink too. What a stupid thing to say. I wouldn't drink if I had his problem. What can be so bad that you'd be a drunkard? And so kept going on like this, kept going on like this. And he'd show up drunk. Dad, let's get rid of this guy. He's no, son. He said, just be patient, be understanding, because if you had his problem, you would drink too. Tell me what his problem is. If it's so bad, what's this problem that he has to drink to get rid of it? He said, the man's an alcoholic. Whoa, yeah. I would probably drink too if I had his problem. You see, sometimes we don't give people some understanding. Even though they're doing things wrong, there's something usually deeper that's causing that, and we have to be understanding. Not that we don't want to help them, and we should pursue helping them, but first, let's make sure that we don't have those same kind of things, issues in our life that will hinder us from helping our brothers, okay? Well, a lot of times I get in discussions with people, and they'll say, well, you did this. And I said, well, you did that. Well, you did this. And well, you did that. And it's funny because one conversation I had with this person, they accused me and said, well, you did this and this and this. I said, yes, you're right. And you did the same thing in a different situation. And they would say, oh, that's different. So, yeah, it's different. Now we're talking about you. So it is different. Well, they didn't like that because it was true. The only difference is the same situation. We're just talking about different people. So it's why I want to encourage you. Don't be so judgmental and critical about other people, but first look at yourself. There's a thing in the news I read just a little bit ago talking about this guy in school that was going to graduate or supposed to graduate, but he had a 0.13 grade average. 0.13 grade average. He had passed 4 classes in his 3 years of high school. And they weren't going to let him graduate. And what's surprising, he was in the top half of his class. It was a bad school, and they were... Anyway, so the article kept going on about how the school district failed him, and the supervisors failed him, and the people around him failed him, and it failed him, and it never did once say... And I think one year he missed 270-something classes or something like that in one semester. I don't know, something like that. Something ridiculous. But anyway, and so they're accusing the school of failing this guy. They failed him. They didn't take care of him. Well, I wonder who failed who, you see. Sometimes we have to look at ourselves first when we want a change in our society, a change in our community, a change in our family, a change in our culture itself. We need to look at ourselves first and see what I can do to change things before I start pointing fingers at other people. All right. Hey, do that, would you? Yeah. Start looking, watching other people, having a little pity on them, and change your attitude about them a little bit. Good to talk to you guys. Hope to see you at church there, and say something to me when you see me. And we'll have to plan a big party or something and bring some donuts and sour chocolate milk. Not really. Okay. Take care of yourselves, you guys. See you later. Bye-bye.